Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So the Ultima is about done. Actually, the chassis and everything is done on it. I do have to do some wiring. I got to put some wires on the motor, and I got to put a transmitter, and I got to put an ESC in there. But other than that, it is done. I am waiting on decals. I have a body, got some paint, so I got to get that done. But the car is basically done. Last video I made the front and the rear shock towers, and I got those put on there. And while I was doing that, I went ahead and just put the rest of the car together. Now, I intended on bringing you guys along with me on that, but really wasn't that interesting, I thought. So I thought I'd just skip forward and show you guys what is on the car from the front to the back. So before we begin, I'd like to ask you guys to please like the video and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't. I really appreciate it if you guys would do that. To start off with, the first thing I had to do was I got a screw set for this. The screws that I had were old. They were the Phillips heads, and I really didn't want to use those. They're pretty beat up. Some of them are stripped out. So I thought, well, let's go ahead and start with a fresh screw kit. So I went ahead and got an RC screw set for the Ultima. It's all stainless steel. It's all hex, so it works really nice on this. I like the way they look, and they're all nice and fresh. I don't have to worry about anything being stripped out. So starting from the front, the bumper is an original bumper. It's not a re-release. It's used, but it's in good condition, so I went ahead and used that. I've got several of those. This one is pretty decent shape, so I went ahead and used that. The front bulkhead on this is from the re-release, as well as the A-arms. And something I would point out is, if you're going to get these for a vintage, just realize that they are slightly different. They're slightly bigger, a little bit beefier than the original ones. They will work, but you might have to file them down a little bit. I found that out when I put a re-release on my other Turbo Ultima. So just keep that in mind. The front caster blocks, they're from the re-re. I did reuse all the pins that I had from some spare parts. So all the pins on here, for the caster blocks and everything, they're all original. The body mount is, not that that's a big deal, but it was off one of the parts trees. All right, so the front camber links on here, they are from a Traxxas Bandit. I did have the original ones that went to an Ultima. They're vintage, but they're not adjustable. And the ones for the Bandit, I actually had these left over. I bought them from a Rustler, and they were the wrong size. I didn't realize that, so I thought I'll just go ahead and put those on here. And they actually fit really nice on there, and they're a little beefier than the original ones, and they're adjustable. So basically, you can turn them with the wrench, which I liked, instead of having to take them off and adjust them, put them back on. So these are going to work out really nice on there. So I put those on there. Circle saver on this is from a Sandmaster. It's vintage. I got it off of eBay. I actually had the same one in my other Ultima, and it fit in there really nice. It does mount differently, so keep that in mind. But it allowed me to mount the servo in the center of the chassis, which is really what I wanted, so I like that. It is not as nice as the re-release, but I had it, and I want to keep the re-release in the other car, so I went ahead and put this one in there, and it's fairly tight. There's no wear on it. It is a brand new vintage part, and so I like that. The only problem that I have with it is that it creates a heck of a bump steer. If you just put it on there and go with it, you have to raise your steering links to eliminate that. You want to make your steering links about as parallel with your A-arms as you can to eliminate that bump steer. And I've done that with some spacers, with some washers basically, and it's basically eliminated all of it. But just keep that in mind if you're going to go with a different servo saver like the Sandmaster. You're probably going to have to adjust your links to eliminate that bump steer, but it works fine. The servo I'm going with is a Futaba S3004, which is just your standard Futaba servo with ball bearings. It works fine. Nothing wrong with it. Should be okay on there. I've got the same thing in my other Ultima, and it's plenty fast. The shocks, if you haven't seen video 6, you might want to check that out. The shocks I use on these are just cheap eBay shocks. They're option 1 shocks, and they're actually for the Plasma Edge or the TT02B Tamiya platform, and they fit on here really nice. The front shocks were a little bit tall, so I went ahead and put a different spring on there. Now you could use the springs that they came with. You just have to go ahead and put a spacer inside of the shock, but that would work pretty well. The wheels on it are from the Turbo Scorpion, the re-release, and they fit really nice on there. The offsets are perfect. The front tires are JC Concept Rips. They are the blue compound, so they're nice and soft. The back tires are from the Traxxas Bandit. Yeah, I know I've got a few Bandit parts on here, but they seem to be fine. They're fairly soft, and they should work and hook up well on my track anyway. The wing mounts that I have, the wing post, they're really hard to find, so luckily I had those. I've got some wing buttons for the Traxxas Bandit order for the wing that comes with my body. That should fit. They're basically like the same type of design that the old vintage ones used to use. The axles are, and the 12mm hexes are extra speed. Got those off of eBay. I actually had those from my other Ultima project, and they were just leftovers. I bought an extra set, so why not throw them on here? The motor is a Holmes 550 Sport. It's a brush motor. I really don't want to go with anything brushless at this point, just because the gearbox is vintage, the gears are vintage, and I really don't want to destroy everything. So I'm gonna kind of keep. It is a 15 turn, so it is a pretty decent motor. It is a modified motor, if you want to call it that. So it'll have plenty of power. I just didn't really want to go with the brushless system right now. I don't want to destroy the gearbox. I don't know if you've noticed, but I did trim the front of these braces down a little bit. I think it gives it a little bit better look. The rear caster blocks, they are the re-release with the 3.5-degree inserts in them. Well, that's one of the things I was very happy with the re-release kit, is that I was able to get the rear caster blocks that have the 3.5. Well, actually it has a bunch of inserts where you can vary the toe in, I think from 2 to 3.5 degrees. The rear camber links are vintage. They came off an eBay parts car that I bought. They're a little bit rough, but they work fine. So I went ahead and threw those on there. The rear stabilizer bar is a vintage one. I didn't have the rear links to go to the stabilizer bar from the ball ends to the A-arms, so I had to make those out of some steering links. But they seem to function fine, so I'm happy with how that turned out. The light sync motor plate is vintage. The plate was a little bit warped, but I was able to bend it back and get it nice and straight. I was really happy that when I put the screws through there, everything lined up and everything was nothing was stripped out and everything. So that's gonna. I kind of like the way that looks. It has a real vintage look to it. The next step is the body, and I've got a couple ideas on the paint here. Not sure how I'm going to do it. I think that's going to be determined once I get the decals and kind of visualize in my head what paint color is going to look the best. That's going to be my next tough decision. So, all right, guys, that's going to wrap up the video. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and check back for my last couple videos. I'll be doing the body, and then hopefully, if the weather cooperates, I'll be doing a run video. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in. Say something about those. These are a fly flying around in here. Get out of there. Get out of the car. Come on.